Us today for the Environmental Contract Roundtable. We did do a construction roundtable about a month and a half ago. We got a lot of good feedback from that, and so we wanted to start trying to do these contract roundtables on a reoccurring basis, based on your feedback as to whether or not it was the information that was useful to all of you, and whether or not it was worth your time to participate. We do want to try to increase whatever our outreach with industry as much as we can. So we're always looking for your ideas how we can get our information out to you a little bit better. During the course of the DCO, we just ask that for any of you who have called in, if you could mute your line, that would help keep the noise levels down as everyone has joined here. If you do have others who may be trying to call in and the lines are full at this point, they can still join via DCO and hear through their computer. They will just have to use the chat in the DCO in order to ask any questions. We will be monitoring the chat during the entire briefing, so if you have any questions, please feel free to use that avenue to ask your questions. The speakers are all going to be fine with you interrupting them or stopping them as part of their briefing to ask any questions that you have. We will do a Q&A session at the end of each one of the briefings before we switch to the next briefer. So you can also wait and save any of your questions for that portion of the briefing as well. Does anyone have any questions before we get started? Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Richard Trevino.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Tammy indicated, I am Richard Trevino. I am the Deputy for Environmental Operations within CZO, and we're going to give you the environmental quality or the EQ update for this afternoon session. What we try to do with the briefings is to try to address your questions early on into the briefing itself. So some of the questions that were submitted as part of the initial discussion or the initial Q&A hopefully are part of the briefing that we presented. As we go through this, if you have any kind of questions, feel free to let us know. But as Tammy indicated, we do have a Q&A after each segment. So with that, we'll go to the next slide, please. The first slide that we have out here really just illustrates the overall FY14 environmental quality program in terms of the overall requirements. This is not the funded portion. These are the requirements that we're projecting in terms of those that are supposed to be identified for dollars. What the chart does depict for you is where we plan on actually having the dollars or the requirements sent out to the respective service centers. This was one of the questions that was raised is, for the FY14 EQ portfolio, where are the requirements going to go to in terms of the service center?
Hello, we can't hear you.
Can y'all hear me now? All righty, so what it boils down to at this point is the chart does indicate that when you look at the actual breakout, this illustrates all of the service centers that we are in fact utilizing for the EQ portfolio. This goes from AFCEC, BPAs, GSA, Corps of Engineers, NAFAC, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, DLA, the 772nd, and also those requirements that are basically executed through the local contracting office for the installation level or the base civil engineer. So this shows what we have done in terms of FY14. And as you can see for right now, and this is just for 14, that the majority of our work is a combination of the Corps of Engineers, and then the second after that will be going towards the base, 772nd and GSA. Those are our primary service agents that we're looking at executing the EQ portfolio. Are there any questions on this particular slide?
This is single from AFCEC. I noticed you have BPAs on this slide. What BPAs are you talking about?
These are the BPA specific for the medias. So if it's like we have BPAs through the Corps of Engineers and through other service centers that are going to do specific water, hazardous waste, hazardous materials, air. So those are media specific blanket purchase agreements that are already established through our existing service agents. This is not the BPA that we're talking about in terms of fence to fence.
Can you expand on the strategy to be determined for AFCEC acquisition?
Yeah, basically what that is telling us that we have about a 2% where we're still trying to figure out where is that going to go to. That's tied up into emergent requirements that we have identified as unforeseen conditions, or we have requirements that we weren't projecting to have to fund this year, but we did get funding for it. So we're looking at that strategy between now and the end of February of where they're going to go to. Depending upon where they're going to go to, we'll basically work with those service agents to let them know that you're projected to get an X number of projects for the rest of the fiscal year. So that's a very small portion of our portfolio.
So the media-specific BPA does take up 17%.
That is correct, yes, sir. That and a lot of that is really our air emission inventories, our air quality type program, our water quality program, and our hazardous waste and hazardous materials for right now.
Thank you. So what does the entire plan breakdown equal out into dollar-wise for a program?
Just basically do the 17% of 308 million. I mean, that's going to be that's the breakout. I do public math for you, but it probably won't work out. So for 17%, it's roughly about 33 million. 33 to 35.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I got a question. The 772nd, is that in the color? I can't quite tell. Is that 3% or 20% for the 772?
Right now, for the requirement is the 3%. Let me read it right because it's 3%.
Okay.
And that will probably, that will get larger as the time progresses from the 14 to the 15 program. As we get into the fence-to-fence discussion, you'll see a lot more requirements shift more equally. We're trying to do a third split between core GSA and 772nd. So that'll be a part of our next discussion here on the next slide. Is there any more questions on the pie chart? Okay, with that, let's go to the next slide. We're on slide 7. And this is what we're going to do is just give you a background on the overall acquisition strategy as it pertains to the EQ portfolio. You've heard quite a bit of things been talking about in terms of fence-to-fence, fence-to-fence when it comes to how we're going to basically accomplish the acquisition of our requirements. And when we talk about fence-to-fence, what we're talking about are things that are, must-pays driven on an annual requirement or a cycle requirement, regulatory driven, that will be funded pretty much as a standard cost of doing business. No different if you're familiar with the CE operations side. It's no different than a utility bill, no different than a service contracts, no different than RWP. That's what we're looking at in terms of the fence-to-fence. These are things that we're trying to do is group these together to where it becomes those things that we need to have in order to run the installation. If I don't have a permit where I can't discharge my waste or use my paint booths or work my corrosion control facilities, or I can't discharge my stormwater, then the base doesn't operate, the mission doesn't get done. So that's the expectation that we're trying to get to in terms of the acquisition strategy of a steady state process to say this is what we're trying to get a single mechanism, a single contractor to come in and work this fence-to-fence initiative for not just the 1 year, but we're looking at it being for multiple years. So there's where you're going to see a lot more of these EQ portfolios being done on the term under fence-to-fence. We're still going to have things that you would still see if you're at a depot. You're still going to have the beast type contracts, but they're just a fence-to-fence on steroids. That's all that it is. It's just the individual depot as a standalone fence-to-fence, where it's a combination of utilizing the DMAG or the old DMEF funds in terms of the depot and consolidating that with the EQ funding so we can get a comprehensive EQ management aspect for those particular depots. That'll be for Tinker Hill and Warner Robins. So those are the 3 primary depots that we're talking about. And it goes back to, again, to the questions of the media-centric BPAs. They're still going to exist. We're still going to have requirements out there that have to be accomplished on a media-specific basis. That's not going to change. All that means is then is that those things that are recurring will be done under a fence-to-fence. Those things that are ranked projects will be done under either a BPA, where that BPA becomes media-centric, or becomes under the BPAs that we have through the Corps of Engineers, GSA, or the 772nd. It doesn't matter. That is the mechanism. What you're also going to see is that more of these requirements will be moved towards a centralized acquisition under AFCEC versus it being done by the installation. So you're going to see more and more of our portfolio be moved from an installation level or a MAGCOM level to an AFCEC centralization in terms of execution, and then to a decentralized oversight. And that's where the installation support teams and the installations will be doing the oversight for us. Any questions so far? Okay, we can go to slide 8, please. And again, this just gives you a further breakdown in terms of how we're going to execute our overall environmental services type portfolio. Now, we already talked about fence-to-fence. We still have installations out there that are on A76. That's not going to change for now. Now, is there discussion about trying to move our A76 EQ work into a fence-to-fence? The answer is yes, but we're not quite there yet. That becomes more of an FY15, FY16 aspect of our strategy. We also have storefront options out there in terms of PACAF and USAFE. Those acquisition vehicles are still moving forward. USAFE is being done under the 772nd, where PACAF is being done under the Corps of Engineers. So although you see fence-to-fence from a CONUS perspective, we still have acquisitions out there for the OCONUS side as well. So hopefully you'll be able to see those things come out here shortly. I believe the PACAF is pretty darn close, if not already out, and the 772nd is working towards an FY15 execution year.
Are the overseas solicitations, are they going to be IDIQ contracts? Or are they going to be just a fence-to-fence conglomeration of the basins?
They're going to be, yeah, they're going to have the ability to do, there'll be IDIQ types where they have the ability to do everything, not just fence-to-fence. So the intent is USAFE will use their BPA for anything that USAFE has within their jurisdiction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And also keep in mind, the GSA 772nd BPAs are also the same way, even though the fence-to-fence is really a task order. It's not a contract. So whatever BPAs we have, our expectation is to still utilize those BPAs to do other requirements that are deemed necessary for a particular installation or an IST or a requirement. So make no mistake that if I do it, the 772nd's BPA will not just do fence-to-fence. If there is a logical continuation of work for Malmstrom to go do a particular job because the contractor is doing it and there's a follow-on permit or a follow-on plan that makes sense, then what we're going to do is we're going to use that as a continuation to carry that through the existing contractor, so we're going to get some efficiencies there. So please understand that fence-to-fence, the BPAs is not just fence-to-fence. It's going to be able to cover the entire EQ requirement regardless of whether it's fence-to-fence or not. It doesn't matter. And that's what I'm saying. It could do a water, it could do an air, it could do natural, cultural, archaeological, doesn't matter. That's why they're set up to be able to do everything.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. And then the other aspect of it is that, you know, we're also going to look at the groupings. So as you see these task orders, and I'm not sure if you guys should have already seen stuff going through the Corps of Engineers and also through GSA. The grouping of the requirements are either going to be done at an installation by itself, where we're grouping multiple contracts. We're also going to group multiple installations into one task order. So you're going to see that if it makes sense for us to group the Texas bases or the Colorado bases to get some efficiencies out of that, that's what we're going to be doing. So as we see the things going out for RFP through the different service agents, expect to see that that particular grouping. So, you know, we've been getting some initial feedback where that's throwing some of the contractors kind of off kilter a little bit because they don't know how to bid on multiple bases at one time. I hate to tell you, you're going to have to learn that pretty quick because that's going to become the norm. That's going to become the standard. Single base execution is going to become the exception. You know, we are following a lot of the ERA PBR model. We did multiple installations to do a PBR. It's worked out very, very well. Fence to fence shouldn't be any different. It's actually much, much easier. Next slide, please. All right, when you talk about fence to fence, these are the types of things that we see in a typical fence to fence acquisition. And the reason why we're showing this is to make sure that as you bid on the fence to fence requirements, you put the right people looking at the task orders and the requirements to where you're not asking, you know, what's in it, what's not, what makes sense, because you guys are experts. That's why you're active contractors, you know, having the technical capability. We want to try to minimize as many questions as we can, especially if it's something that people just don't seem to understand in terms of how to deal hazardous waste. If it's a basic question that you don't know how to do hazardous waste, then maybe you ought to get somebody that knows hazardous waste to look at the proposal. That's just my personal experiences going through this process, because we are seeing questions in there that quite honestly, when I look at them, I just go and say, okay, if you're asking me if I can triple rinse a drum, then you probably don't know enough about the requirement then to be bidding on it. So all I ask that you do is just look at that to save us a lot of time going through the RFP process, because we do have quarterly obligation rates that we have to achieve. So it's very important that you guys put your best and brightest on it. So when you look at the fence-to-fence issues, again, we're looking for a minimum 3-year. It's a basic with bid options, but a total of 3 years minimum. We're looking for typically 5 years if at all possible. So when you look at the Corps of Engineers and their service agents, they went out and basically did a minimum 3 years. Some they did 5, some they did 3. The GSA, they're all 5 years, bid plus 4. And the expectation is when you get this, you're going to become the contractor for the next 3 to 5 years, depending on your performance. And if you look at the requirements that are in there, it's simple stuff. It's hazardous waste, hazardous materials, you know, AEI inventory, things that are driven by permits, sampling analysis, EFCA reporting, you know, stormwater. It's stuff that is very, very simple. Now, the kicker is going to be is we're also going to have bid options or task options as part of the fence-to-fence, and it's all those rank projects that you normally would see executed through the installation. We're putting those in as bid options. So again, fence-to-fence is not just a small item. It's going to be what we deem to be the requirement for the next 3 to 5 years potentially for that installation or installations. So as a result of that, you're going to see a huge requirement come down your way, and we're going to need your help to be able to bid on that effectively so we can get efficiencies and also get the best proposals from you guys. Are there any questions?
Yeah, they're saying they lost they can't hear. So I don't know if they're on the phone line or DCO.
Well, it's probably DCO. If you can have the DCO folks call in on the line, then if nothing else.
No, we used up our lines.
Okay.
So, someone from Cave Online or Lata, Western, we can only hear the DCO, not on the telephone.
Are we still online?
Okay, they hear on the DCO, they're not hearing on the phone.
Okay.
The phone's on, right?
It's on and it's not muted.
So,
Okay.
Can folks on the phone hear us? Hello? Why don't we dial back in then?
Okay.
Yes,
Oh, you're, okay.
if you want, yes, we can hear
Okay, well, stay on the line. We're going to just disconnect and call back in on the phone only,
no,
though.
I wouldn't do that.
It's- it's an-
people on there, more people.
Yeah, we'll lose them all.
We're not going to lose them. It's our number that you don't lose them. You just dial back in.
They have to.
Trust me.
So we can only hear the DCO, not on the telephone.
They might have tried to dial in after school.
That could be what it is. I mean,
Yeah. That's how we keep-
So is everybody on the phone okay? We've only heard one person respond.
Is there more than one person on the phone?
you. Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, BM is here.
Okay, so we got at least 2 on the phone.
Whoa, so it's gotta be a lot.
Okay, well, I guess we'll keep pressing forward. If there's only 2 responses, there's 28 additional lines that they can call into.
We only have 20 systems, so.
Okay, then let's go, if there's no other questions, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, I'm sure this is what everybody's anxious for. This is the first phase of our fence-to-fence. And what we show here is this shows basically two things. It shows where we're going to execute, all the installations that we're going to execute by service center, and then the check marks indicate the RFPs that have already gone out. And then here's a quick update. I'm going to give you a couple of more RFPs that have gone out. We've also had Joint Base Langley-Eustis. That will go out on the 5th of March. Charleston Shaw will go out on the 14th of February. Seymour Johnson Moody will go out on the 14th of February. Nellis Creech and the Range went out on the 6th of February. Cannon and Holland went out on the 6th of February. Little Rock and Altus will go out today, or it should have already been out today. So, and the color code represents the service agent in which it's being done. So for the first phase, the majority of our fence-to-fences with the bid options are being conducted through the Corps of Engineers. So the only one that we have right now through GSA is Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst. So that's just for phase one. Are there any questions on the particular question on this slide here? I'm not ready to answer specific RFP questions for the Corps, so don't ask me that because I'm not the POC for it. Go back through the formal process with the Corps of Engineers or through GSA. I'm here to only answer questions if you have anything specific about what's on this particular slide. I am not going to get into source selection type issues. Any questions? All right, I guess that answered a lot of them then. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now, this is what we're proposing for the third quarter, and this is subject to change depending upon the award of our BPAs for the ones that are in yellow. For instance, the ones that are in yellow are going to go through the 772nd. The 772nd, we're going to be going through the GSA to get a second BPA. That second BPA has not gone out yet, and we'll be getting a schedule from them hopefully in the next couple of days. The intent of the second BPA to be executed by the 772nd through GSA will hopefully have the RFP going out hopefully in the next 6 to 8 weeks, worst case, if not sooner. And again, to be getting the GSA BPA, I want everybody to understand, you have to already be on a GSA schedule. You have to have an 899 schedule. And if you don't have an 899 schedule, you're not going to be able to compete for the GSA BPA, even though it will be executed through the 772nd. So is there a clear understanding when it comes to the GSA schedule piece? So when you look at the colors, what we have is we have Tyndall and Hurlbut going through the Corps of Engineers, but they're going to utilize a GSA 899-1 schedule. So again, if you're going to want to try to compete through the Corps of Engineers on that particular acquisition, you have to make sure you're on a GSA schedule. Andrews, Dover, Hanscom, that's going to be hopefully, as long as Cheyenne Mountain, Shreveport, Peterson, Laughlin, Dyson, Goodfellow those will be individually grouped by their particular region. Andrews, Dover, and Hanscom will be one task order. Cheyenne Mountain, Shreveport, and Pearson will be one task order. Laughlin, Dias, and Goodfellow, one task order. That is the expectations. We're trying to group these by region or by state.
I've got a question from EMIC. Are these all going to be limited to 8 days set aside?
No, they will be going through the process. If the second BPA through GSA will be a small business. If 8 days get the award of that BPA, then they'll be awarded based upon whoever gets the task order. So that is the expectation there. 8 days can compete for it, but it's not an 8 day set aside. It is a small business minimum. It's small business and below, correct. So it's not for large businesses. It's small business and 8 days, but it's not an 8 day set aside. Are there any questions on this slide? And again, this will probably be changing depending upon our subsequent acquisition vehicles for the GSA BPA, and then how well the Corps does their acquisition on phase one. That if they can meet the quarterly obligations, and that's key for us. If we can achieve our quarterly obligation by the end of third quarter, then we will be shifting basis around in order to be able to meet that quarterly obligation, because it's imperative that we meet the obligation rate. So it's not just a matter of awarding it on 30 September. That's the least of my issues. I'm looking for a worst case end of 30 June award for these particular phase 2 requirements. So some of this may be up in jeopardy in terms of where they go to.
On the NACE code, is that going to have a size limitation? They're asking, I assume it's 562910.
500 employees.
500 employees, but if it's through GSA, do they use a different size limitation? Do we know?
I don't know. We'll take that back as as an action, and we'll let you all know that on whether or not the size of it, and then we'll make sure through our CP office that they get that back to you all. I don't believe. I mean, if it's a small business, it's going to be a small business, so whatever that criteria is what we'll probably end up going with. So if there's a size limitation, it'll be based upon purely what the small business requirement has through GSA.
And another question from you, RS, can you advise what core districts are you issuing that have defense opportunities, i.e. what specifically tops? That may have been in your slide.
Here's what we currently have right now. For the phase 1s, these are the districts that we're using. We're using Norfolk, Savannah, Omaha, Seattle, Albuquerque, Tulsa, Sacramento, and Mobile. Those are for the phase 1s. And the probability is high that, typically if you're at Tyndall, Hurlbut, you're going to use the typical district that's going to be in that region that's typically supporting them. And that's where a lot of the fence-to-fences have come into play. So we pretty much used almost every district you can think of within the Corps of Engineers, because we've given them so many requirements, they've had to use more than one district. There's just no way they can get the need done. When it comes to the phase 2 and then the FY 15 and 16 program, the probability is very high again that they're going to use multiple districts, just for the sheer fact that they just can't have one do it. We've got 1 out of Norfolk, 2 out of Savannah. We've got the majority of them out of Omaha and out of Albuquerque. All the others are just onesies and twosies, but your big ones are Omaha and Albuquerque right now that are doing the bulk of the acquisition. I hope that clarifies a little bit of the question. Are there any other questions before I go to the next one?
Phase 2 will only use the new ESBPAs, which is expected out soon.
No, phase 2 will be using the existing BPA through GSA, the second BPA hopefully through the 772nd, and then acquisition vehicles through the Corps of Engineers. I am not confident that the MATOC will be a phase 2 opportunity, because if I understand correctly from talking with the Corps, that the MATOC is running out of ceiling or is becoming a challenge to meet our requirement of having multiple years to get that done. That's why MATOC was used only very, very limited. I believe the MATOC was only used on about maybe half at the most or a third of the acquisitions, because that was the way they can get it done for now, but will not be a long-term solution for them, if I understand correctly from talking with Tom Zink. But for the second phase, for instance, like for GSA, we will be using the existing BPA through GSA that's already been awarded. And then, for the ones in yellow, the plan is to use that with the second BPA, but a lot of it depends upon the award of that second BPA, so we may have to shift some of that around and then use some of our FY15. More of our FY15 may end up going to the 772nd, just because of the fact that we haven't gotten that second BPA yet. Any other questions there, Vince?
This is probably a GSA question. Large businesses want to know if they can team with the small businesses in GSA. Is that?
The answer is, the question is that can large businesses team with small businesses on the GSA schedule? The answer is yes, they can. We've had that discussion with them. The only stipulation is that large businesses must have a GSA schedule. In order for you to do any teaming arrangement on the GSA contract BPAs, whether through the first or second or even subsequent BPAs, you have to have an existing GSA schedule. I don't care if you're 8A small business, SCB, large business, you have to have that 899 schedule. If you don't have it, you cannot partner with anybody. They cannot even use you as a subcontractor. You have to be a vendor or a contractor that has that 899 schedule. Okay? Any other questions?
Good for now.
All righty, let's go to the next slide, please. So what we try to do is basically take the questions that were asked prior to the roundtable, and hopefully we addressed most of those. I'm going to address those that I don't think we identified into the briefing. When it comes to the regional contracts, are we still going to intend to do those? It's kind of a yes and no answer. The answer is yes, we're still going to do regional type contracts, but they're going to be really done more under the aspects of the service agent and under more of a BPA region. That's where we're going to do the grouping. We're going to do a lot of that under the GSA 772nd and the Corps overall task. Like for instance, the Corps of Engineers did a region-specific contract. They just lumped Kennon and Holloman into one. That is a regional type contract that was purely for that particular requirement. Are we going to have regional BPAs like we had in the past, like for the East region? The answer is no, we're probably not going to do that, at least not in the near future. The only ones that we're going to have like that will be for USAFE and PACAF. All the others will be BPAs either through GSA 772nd, through their particular mechanisms, or if the Corps will actually get a contract awarded to support that. And right now they don't have anything in place to make that happen. That's why for us, MATOC is probably not going to be a long-term viability for fence-to-fence. Next slide, please. I think we answered a lot of these there. Next slide, please. And then it says, can we publish a monthly update on fence-to-fence acquisition schedule, show on RFPs, proposed acquisition methods? We'll work with our CP office and we'll make sure that we get that out. That's not an issue. That also helps us to make sure that we're providing you enough notification as possible so that we can get all the good folks bidding on it to where we can make sure that we have a quality RFP that comes back, or a quality proposal that comes back to us. So that's to our benefit as well. Can you provide an update on expected environmental workload where available? We'll take a look at, I guess whoever asked the question, we'll provide what we can in terms of the expected workload. If you want me to tell you, hey, how much of this, how much is going to go to Robbins, I probably won't be able to tell you to that level of detail. And if you want to know by project, I won't tell you that level of detail. I can tell you, you saw the pie chart. If you do the basic math, you can know exactly what money's going to what service center, and that's a good indication of where you ought to focus a lot of your efforts on. And I'll only foot stomp the fact that if you're not talking to GSA, and if you're not talking to Rose Dominguez or Carol England here in the San Antonio office, then you're probably not talking to the right people. If you're not talking to the core PMs within the different districts, you're probably not talking to the right folks. And if you're not talking to Kathy Zapata within the 772nd, then you're probably not talking to the right folks. Those are the folks that you need to be talking to. Worst case is you can talk with Tammy and Vince, because they're the overall clearinghouse for acquisitions. So if I don't have an answer, they're a lot smarter than I am. They can probably get you the right people. But if you're looking for project by project detailed numbers, you're not going to get it from me. I've got 3,000 plus line items, and I'm not going to do a query for 3,000 line items. So, not trying to upset you, just trying to give you the facts. Sorry. Any other questions on this slide? But if you follow the fence-to-fence that I give you in the slides, you'll get about 90% of the issues. If you want to know the type of work that you need to be prepared for, the fence-to-fence slide will give you about 90% of it. All the other stuff is natural resources, cultural resources, It's going to be geo-based. It's going to be even water, air, haz waste type issues that are not considered recurring by permit. So, and that's the, other than natural and cultural resources, everything else is just onesies and twosies. So that, between natural, cultural, and fence to fence, that is literally 90 to 95% of the program. Okay? And right now, fence to fence does not include natural and cultural resources. We're going to probably use the existing media BPAs to get that done for now, with an expectation, though, that we're going to eventually lump all that under the fence to fence. We may do that in 15 and 16. We just couldn't do that for 14 because it was too big of a program. We have some isolated cases in there as bid options, but not full blown. And there's also plans down the road that we will start to include in the 16 Beyond program to include the long-term maintenance and the remedial action operations piece for restoration. As the PBRs go towards the end of their life, we're going to start including those as part of the fence to fence, as part of our long-term operations. So just keep that in the back of the mind for the FY16 program. Any questions?
No, they're just asking for some details on PLCs, so I'm just writing these on exactly.
Perfect.
So you're good to go.
Next slide, please. Okay, so is there anything from an EQ perspective before I exit stage right and bring on Mr. Ian Smith, the Restoration Division Chief?
I think they're good. They're saying thanks.
Saying great.
Oh, thank you all very much for your patience. Give me about 30 seconds so I can exit stage here, and I'll bring in the better looking individual.
Hold the camera.
Good afternoon. My name's Ian Smith, and as Richard said, I'm the Division Chief for Environmental Restoration. So I'd like to walk you through our program quickly. Slide, please. Just some basic things. The ERA program is committed to meeting our lawful obligations and protecting human health and the environment. Our three areas are comply with the law, restore land to mission use, and centralize the resource allocation and prioritize things Air Force-wide, just as the EQ program is doing. The ERP program is made up of the Installation Restoration Program and Military Munitions Response Program. The Air National Guard handles their ERP program separately, as does the BRAC folks. And then ultimately our objective is to accelerate site cleanup and come up with long-term cost reductions for the program. Slide, please. We have some goals, both Air Force and OSD goals. You see them on the screen about where we want to get on accelerated site completion. This was driven by Mr. Yonkers when he was the Assistant Secretary. And we're trying to make sure that we get everything under a PBR, or performance-based remediation contract, 90% by FY15. We're looking to be a lot closer to 95 to 98%. The DoD goals are a little longer term. They are looking at having stuff in place, response complete 95% by FY21. And then they've come up with a new goal for the MRSPP, which is the Munition Response Site Prioritization Program, to get the scoring done for 95% of the MMRP program this fiscal year. We've got a number of initiatives that we're going to use to accelerate site cleanup. Thank you, Richard. And meet program goals. The primary one, which I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of, is our PBRs, or performance-based contracting. We're accelerating site closures so that we can catch up with the DoD goal. Just as the EQ program, our big focus is on doing this as base-wide or fence-to-fence rather than doing this as site-by-site solutions. We get some economies of scale, and we get better interaction as we juggle the sites and line them up to work together. And what we're seeing out of the program is a reduction in our overall cost to complete and our cost for doing the cleanups. Slide, please. Looking forward to the 15 budget, which is currently being worked on. It continues to fully support the Air Force cleanup program and our accelerated cleanup goals and the program goals to meet DoD requirements. Slide, please. This again is the active duty program, and it's just a bar chart showing where we've been from FY12 through FY13, where we're looking for 14 and projections for 15. The key points for us are that we are seeing the savings through the PBC program, about $460 million in the program. Also seeing reductions through centralization and management reduction. Another good news story for us is that the MMRP program, we've got about 725,000 acres of rangeland. We've been able to return about 425,000 of that to active mission use. So that's a big success for us. And then in the President's budget for 15 has continued use of our PBRs and is posturing us to meet the OSD goals. Slide, please. This is a snapshot looking at our PBR plan for the entire active duty Air Force, which means it's all the U.S. installations. I'll get into details on the upcoming stuff on the future slide. So obviously we've started awarding these in 11, and this is a list of the ones we've awarded, and the 12 and 13s have been awarded, and now we're coming to the 14 program, and we'll talk about that in more detail next. Slide, please. So here are the upcoming PBRs and our tentative release dates for the various documents, either RFI or RFPs. Joint Base Charleston Naval Weapons Center is going to be a Type C contract. We're putting an RFI out this month. Alabama, Tennessee is being handled by the Omaha District, and they're hoping to have their RFI release date out in spring. We're looking to award both of these in 14. Actually, all of these are looking for 14 awards. Eielson is being done through Work 09, and the RFP will be out this month. Cape Cod, which was formerly known as MMR, is going to be done through AFCEC, or here at the 772nd, be a C-type contract with the RFP coming out in the next 4 weeks. Joint Base McGuire-Dix is being handled by the Tulsa District, and the RFP is coming out this spring for that one. Again, that one has an award this fiscal year. Yes, Letitia? March? Thank you. So an update on this, the Eielson RFP release date is slipped to March 14, so everybody can hold their breath for another couple of weeks. Slide, please. Just to give you an idea of how we're taking our program. Our program is about $450 million this year. These are the priorities we use as we decide how we're going to allocate our resources. Obviously, our number one is protecting human health and the environment. And then as you go down the steps, these are the projects or the work that we're going to have out there that we're going to use for assigning where the money is. Right now, we're fully funded. If there's another sequestration cut or some other savings that we have to come up with for the program, this is what we'll use to rack and stack where the cuts are. Slide, please. Going into 14, and actually this is what we had going into 13 and what we're going to have over the long haul. Our challenges are, especially with the emerging contaminants, looking at 1,4-dioxane, PFOS, PFOA. TCE is obviously not an emerging contaminant. The issue there is that the regulators are talking about significantly dropping the MCL. We are having some ongoing issues with some of the states about non-degradation standards. That plays a lot of fun as we get into negotiations and reviews of our plans and projects. And then for us, a big one is the regulator use of toxicity values outside the EPA's IRIS process. We try to make our decisions best on finances and science. We let logic try to dictate what we're doing. We're trying to bring the regulators around to that point of view, but that is a big challenge for us going into the FY14. Slide, please. Going through the questions and answers, we were asked how we're doing on the PBR projects. Are they having the efficiencies? Are they effective? Have change orders been required? Are sites are progressing towards closure? As you can tell from the fact we've had significant reductions in CTC and the fact that we've gotten some significant accelerations of site closures, yes, I would say it's very successful. We have our MPOs, which are minimum performance objective, and the contracting folks out there have come up and exceeded that quite a bit by about 262% last year. So we are finding it to be very successful. There have been change orders, normally for unforeseen site conditions or because we've had issues with the regulators that have required it. It is not something that we do, and it is not a freebie. If I'm going to change an MPO, then I'm expecting consideration back from the contractor if I am not getting what I originally paid for. So we have held that line very strongly and gotten funding back or money back on each of these change orders we've had to execute. PBR acquisition approach for 2014 beyond. The remaining opportunities were on the slide. We are very happy with PBR, so we'll continue to pursue them. And you've seen what the list of upcoming work is going to be. Contract management philosophy for PBR contracts. Pop for every subplan. Yeah, we've got some issues. The early ones came up. We're working very closely with the 772nd to resolve these. We've got a dedicated Tiger team here. I have my pit bull, Lee Canessa, leading it from our side, and we're reaching some very good results for it that we will be getting out to the PBR community or the contracting community as we have our PBR PMR. I'm hoping that everybody's been told, they've gotten at least the save the date email that we're planning on having it the last 2 weeks in March. The week before, I'd like to have a 1 hour or so DCO just to try to set the stage. We're looking for this PBR to be a very frank discussion with each of the individual contractors with the PBR to go over what's worked, what hasn't worked, and what we can do to make things work better so we all get ahead. Overcoming regulatory delays or regulatory problems on PBRs. DSMO is only part of it. We've been talking with the states, and this is nationwide, not just 1 or 2 regions. Part of the problem is their limitations, and the couple of states we've approached about additional DSMOA, the results have been good. For example, New Mexico is now interested in doing that. But I'll be honest, a lot of this is in y'all's hands. A consistent theme that we're hearing from the various states is quality of documents that are being submitted. And if I can, I'm sorry, Vince, go ahead.
We have a question. Can you share what the contract issues are? I imagine that's number 3. Be aware of these issues.
Okay. The issues that are showing up on the slide are talking about having pops for every subclan, and if I finish something early, all of a sudden it forces everything else to be accelerated, and then we get into these issues of having a bona fide need if there's an early site closure. The message we're trying to make sure the contracting community understands is that we are buying an end result. We are not buying every interim step along the way. And so we're trying to make sure that as somebody gets an accelerated site closure, we don't punish them for getting there. And so that's what we're trying to work out with the contracting community to make sure we're all on the same sheet of music. And most of them are. We're just trying to make sure that they're all using the standard decision matrix. If you get, if there's 3 subclins to get to a site closure and you're able to do it in 1 subclin or 1.5 subclins, our end objective has been met. And we're trying to make sure that that is what is dealt with, not going, oops, I'm going to T for C because you don't need the rest of it. So we're aware of that and we're working hard with it. The 772nd has been very responsive. As I said, in about a month when we do our PMR, I expect that you'll have some more individual feedback on those. Mr. Laborde.
Yes, another question. Response to document quality.
Yes.
Occur in the timely review which provides quality feedback is paramount early in the PBR, so the contractor can change course to address the quality. 8 to 10 months in is too late.
Absolutely agree. The folks need, my recommendation, I'm not going to tell you how you do your business, but what we got recommended by one of the Carolinas was they got a brand new contractor who'd never worked in the state. He came to Regular and said, hey, I'm going to send you 5 work plans next week. And they said, hold on, wait a minute. Let's do 1 work plan together, sit down, get it hammered out as a template, and then you can do the other 4 and things will be a breeze through. And that's exactly what happened. They sat down together, worked collaboratively to get that template worked out, document quality was established, and the other 4 work plans sailed through. And they've seen continuing success with respect to that. And for those, whichever one of you out there has Fort Stewart, that's the one that the regulators were touting as the poster child for how to do this. I won't tell you what base or state it is. I've got another one where document quality is very poor. The comment from the regulator was pretty frank. I'm not going to be your GD quality control. You better give me quality documents or I'm not reviewing them. And I can't throw any amount of money at them to change their mind. So we're in this together. We're trying to get DISMOA and other methods to improve regulator response, but a lot of this rests on the contractor community to turn in quality documents. Next slide, please. PBR objectives. This is another issue where we have a disconnect between Table 1 and Section F and what's going to rule. We're aware of it. We're working, again, very closely with the 772nd. We have a way ahead, and we will be giving that to you during our PMR the last 2 weeks in March. Answer to number 6, what are the planned PBRs and contracting agencies, contract vehicles for 14 and beyond? That was provided on previous slides. Is the answer to slide 2 also. Number 7 is update of Air Force PBRs for 14. Again, that was on the slides. So you have that information. We've tried to be as specific as we can. That gets to be fairly fluid depending on how well our documents are and how much workload each of the various players have to make corrections. An update on Air Force PBRs and follow-on PBRs in 15 through 20. That was on the slides for 15. I have one in 16 that will be handled by DOE. That's at Dover, but we don't have any others planned besides what you saw on the slides past 15, 16. Vince, there's another question.
Will AFCEC allow all contractors to participate in the PBR, PMR, so we can have people access the information? The outcome of the discussion has material effect on the next round of proposal preparation.
What we do with the PBR, PMR is we sit down with each of our current contractors. If that request is coming from somebody who does not have a current PBR, I will be more than happy to let Tammy set something up to get it out to the rest of the community so everybody is bidding off the same level playing field. Not looking to play favorites. I don't play incumbents. I play best proposals. So we will be happy to make sure that everybody gets the information required. The advantage of doing it in the PMR is I'm one-on-one with the specific companies that have current contracts, and I can be pretty pointed in the discussion both ways, which I'm not going to be throwing daggers. I expect to receive some daggers so that we can make our process better. But if you don't have a current PBR, then we will find another way to make sure that you get that same information.
Next question, any decision on providing ROMs for PBRs?
That one is a little tougher. We're still struggling with, to be honest with you. We've been trying to take the one with the biggest bang for the buck, for example, resolving the disconnect between Table 1 and Schedule F, or the bona fide need rule as we do subclins and do the POPs on that. That is another one high on the list, but we took the top 5, and that one came in as number 6. I have broached the subject with my branch chiefs based on feedback from industry I've received over the past 8 weeks. We have not gotten a chance to sit down with contracting and really hammer that out. You'll see in one of the later answers, though, we really want to have your schedule drive our budget rather than let our funding profile drive your budget. Y'all are the experts and know what you need to do to most efficiently and expeditiously get this done. And I really hate the fact that we come back, or that we're in a position to come back and go, oh gee, I need you to slow this down or spread this out, because all it does is increase costs. And if I don't make this lucrative and profitable for you, I don't get any competition, and at the end of the day, the taxpayers lose. Slide, please. Any changes to general PPR, SU, RFO requirements for the 14 procurements? We don't have any that we flagged up now. That's subject to change as we do lessons learned. Hopefully we are not repeating the mistakes of the past. As we get a lesson learned, we try to incorporate it into the next next solicitation we go out with. Provide better guidance on availability of funding by year. This was the one I was just referring to. We would prefer that you build the schedules based upon the best technology and efficiency in the field, and then we will work to make sure that our funding lines up for that. Will AFCEC execute any further PBRs on the Work 09? We only have one left on the Work 09, and that is for Alson. Any lesson learned that you can share from the previous awarded PBRs? You know, this is teaching my grandmother to suck eggs. Y'all understand this. Early discussions with the regulators is key. You got to get the documents set up. You got to make sure you've got the relationships with them. Trying to come down and dictate to them is usually not very successful because they're pretty insulated. If you sit down and partner with them, they're much more responsive, and it's quality, quality, quality. Don't be surprised that when you turn in crap, you get crap from the regulator about what you turn in. Now, I'm not saying you roll over every time they want you to, you know, change an MCL or do some additional stuff that's not required, but it's up to us to work with a partnership, and the big things we're seeing is the problems with the regulators are the people we put on get in an argument with them and are combative. They don't give them the straight facts, and document quality. You don't hire a 22-year-old kid fresh out of school, expect them to write a document, and not have anybody higher up in the food chain review it for quality. My PMs get a little tired of being the QCs, and then the regulators really hate being the QCs. So those are the big lessons learned. Slide, please. Update information schedules to help. That's on the fuels projects. You can see the answer up there. They can be tracked using the information posted on the clearinghouse results. Will AFCEC procure fuel services in the when the Work 09 contract expires? It's up there talking about a SATOC. I'm a little concerned about a SATOC. I know that Mr. Hicks, my boss, is finds those anathema. He much prefers MATOCs, multiple awards.
So this is the
SATOC.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Excuse me.
For single award task.
Thank you.
When we're also looking at requirements right now, working with the customer to see if there's a need for a standalone fuel services type contract.
Okay.
So as soon as we have a way ahead or information on that, we'll make sure that we get that out to everybody. But we're just trying to analyze those requirements right now across the 5 entities.
Okay. And then I won't read question 3 because it's not mine. I got more restoration questions. Can the government interact on behalf of the stakeholders' interests with regulators? I think we've talked about this. Nothing's changed. We work it. Y'all can have an impact by getting your quality up. Expect environmental workload. I will tell you that we have what we call the ERA drawdown plan. It's a glide slope on getting down to steady state. We want to get a lot of site closures. As you saw, we had to have 95% RC to meet DoD goals by 2021. But we've got some very complex sites out there that, frankly, your grandchildren will probably be bidding on to do the cleanup at because we can't get them cleaned up. So those will go, but we're expecting to see a much smaller workforce at that point in time and much less work. As Richard said, we're hoping to roll a lot of our RAO and LTM into the fence defense contracts, which means they'll have dual funding sources. But by 19, I think we're supposed to be down to where we need to be with respect to our manpower, and frankly, my shop is going to be quite a bit smaller. An update on expected environmental workload. Just talked about that. What are the planned PBRs and contracting agency get? We already talked about that on 16. Slide, please. This is pretty much stuff we've already talked about. Somebody ran all their questions into one, but I've addressed all of these previously. The answer is we're aware of the problems. We're working to fix them. I think everybody will be happy with the results, and we will discuss those with you during the PBR, PMR, or if you don't have a PBR already, when we set up the other business opportunity or business discussion for the folks not on a current PBR. Slide, please. This is Tammy, I believe you're in. We're not planning on using the work past the Eielson PBR.
Right, and that's what I understand, that it's just going to be just completing the active PBRs that are in place at this point, only because the period of performance doesn't really allow for what you guys need
Right.
for PBRs at this point. And you know, the intent is not to do a reprocurement of work 09 at this point as well, too. So.
Okay. Question number 2 is PBR acquisition approach for 14 and beyond, remaining opportunities and vehicles to be used. We've already talked about the PBRs that remain for 14, 15, and the one in 16. At that point, we'll have everything under a PBR in 16. So we're not planning on doing any others. You know, we're shooting for 10-year pops, and we're looking to get a lot of site closures in that, a lot of response completes. Most of those are going to be done through 772nd or the Corps, and they are going to be Type C contracts. As you heard me indicate when I misanswered one of the other questions, we're big fans here of MATOCs. We are not fans of SATOCs. And I don't care if it's a small business setup side, full and open, Native American. If it's not a MATOC, I'm not walking down that path.
And again, that the C contract is really the only option you have for the period of performance that you know are going to probably need for a PBR type requirement.
And then AFCEC CI is referring to the BRAC program. CI is installations, and the BRAC folks are handling the cleanup at the closed installations. So they're planning a procurement to address any residual things they have. They have a little more work than we have on the active side because they're trying to get rid of the land, and the cleanup requirements to get rid of land are quite a bit different from the cleanup requirements on an active base.
We have a question. Can you remind your PMs to not have sidebar meetings, email exchanges, or telecoms discussing approaches, outcomes without your contractor present? If you don't agree with that philosophy, could you explain why? And she was referring to with the regulator. So that would be having sidebar meetings and exchanges between the PMs and the regulator.
Okay, I'm going to have to chase down some instances. I had a meeting with Secretary Flynn of New Mexico Environment Department. I did not have the contractor in the room because I was talking bigger picture stuff about what I needed to do to support New Mexico in being responsive to the document review. I'm not aware of our folks going out randomly having meetings with regulators on PBRs. Frankly, we're expecting the PBR contractor to be out there having those meetings. That's kind of why we want them in the lead. And I know my RPM at Kirtland is working very hard to make sure that the face to the regulator for the New Mexico-Arizona PBR is the New Mexico-Arizona PBR contractor. Same thing with the Kirtland bulk fuel facility. So if you've got a specific instance, please let me know. My email address is ian.smith.9@us.af.mil, and I'll be happy to look into it or work it. But ultimately, our philosophy is y'all are the lead. You're the face to the regulators, which is another reason why we really emphasize that you need to have a cooperative relationship with them and not a combative. So number 2, I think I just answered. We're going to have all our PBRs in place by 15, and we're not planning any other big PBR actions after that. We are still discussing what we will do with respect to emergence and pop-ups and what the hell happens when EPA lowers the MCL for TCE from 5 to, parts per billion to 5 parts per trillion. But that hasn't, we don't have anything firm on that yet. Slide, please. What is the status of the fence-to-fence compliance contracts? Can you provide us with the current acquisition strategy? I believe Richard went into that in excruciating detail. I don't think there's any new news up there, Richard? No, sir. Okay. Slide, please. Tammy mentioned our strategy for replacing Work 09 and Ecos 09, and that is that we will not be doing that. There's not a demand right now. Not saying that 6 years from now there won't be, but currently, given our PBR structure, we won't need it. Given the fence-to-fence, we don't need it. So for now, we do not plan on doing that. And then she did mention earlier that they're working the SATOC with respect to the fuels repair services, and that is a separate thing.
Right, we'll utilize the SATOC contract in the interim as we're analyzing the requirements for another acquisition, maybe perhaps for the fuel services.
Thank you. Slide, please. Another fuels question. It's going to the SATOC as best I can tell.
Yep, SATOC. Ecos 09 as well until that period of performance expires, not for the services piece, but for any type of construction piece as well too. And then we do have the fuel scope in the upcoming RE&C and WE&C construction contracts too. So.
REAC and WEAC?
I'm sorry?
REAC and WEAC?
Yeah. We don't call it REC and WEC. Right.
We've answered number 7 already. I don't know that it's, I disagree with the aversion to allowing large business to compete. This is an editorial that I'll give. We don't have an aversion to it. We're following government policy of supporting small business. We go out for best value where we can. We go out for large business where we can, but a lot of it depends on the market research. And we have folks here from small business if you want to get into a lot more detail. But basically, we go out as directed by higher headquarters. Slide, please. If these contracts, and I'm assuming they're talking about work and ECOS and that, will it be small business set aside? I think we've already addressed we're not going back out. We're not going to execute any more PBRs on the Work 09, just the Allison one. And lessons learned we've already talked about. Work the relations with the regulators, document quality, and getting out ahead of the game, being realistic in what you come up with. We are not going to have change orders, relaxing requirements without some sort of consideration from the contract. Slide, please. Already addressed this one. We've worked with them on it, and we do need private sector to help out with better document quality and better regulator relations. Does AFCEC still intend to replace regional service contracts as small business set-asides? I believe Mr. Trevino spoke to that, and he posted the timelines. We are finding a lot of savings from fence to fence. As most of you know, that was my area last year. 3,300 line items is really tough to centrally manage. Fence to fence is the only way we're going to do it with a 5 or 6 person shop. Slide, please. Slide, please. As a contractor, we would be interested in knowing how we can highlight skills and capabilities we would like to emphasize to AFCEC, and what are the sources of information we can get. Well, we need to back up one because I blew past an answer apparently. AFCEC is pleased with low price, technically acceptable strategy and performance.
I don't know if that one refers back to it or not, but I remember seeing the other question. And what I would like to refer them to is under the Business Opportunities page on the AFCEC website, we provide a monthly listing of all of the projects that have met clearinghouse. Again, that's not a, yes, we're sure these are going to be funded, but at least they've gone through the next checks with regard to reviewing that requirement as a valid requirement going forward, and what contract vehicle we anticipate those requirements to be on. So if anyone can't get to that information, please just let me know. This is Tammy O'Neill, and I'll just call you and I'll walk you through how to get to that information. So that is, I think, the most up-to-date information on any of the projects that we are executing here in-house through AFCEC. And then the other slides are going to be the projection ones that you guys provided during this briefing. And also on our website, you can also get information for the FY14 execution plan, AFCEC execution plan that's out there for all of the programs, not just environmental, but for construction and other programs as well.
Could you make the DCO on the phone for a second, please? I'd like to ask Mr. O'Neill something.
All right, this is Tammy again. Mr. Smith had to give me a line to say, okay, well, really what you're asking. One of the things I wanted to discuss is really the process to how to get into AFCEC if you want to come and talk to someone about what you do and what other opportunities are there. The Enterprise Procurement Division, where I work, and that is headed up by Lieutenant Colonel Susan Reardon Smith, is really your first stop. We'll make sure that we provide the contact information for everyone as part of the information from the DCO here, so you know who to contact. Really, it's best sometimes as the first step in the door, because we can get you to the right people that you need to talk to market your business and your capabilities with regard to execution of the AFCEC mission.
Okay, we have a question on MEC, which I guess is munitions. How is AFCEC going to handle MEC? Is MEC going to roll up in defense, or is the Air Force going to use the Corps of Engineers MEC contracts?
So what's MEC?
Munitions, explosives, yeah.
Something. What we call
MRP. We've got we've been putting contracts out that cover our MMRP requirements. So we're covering that as we go through with the restoration program rather than the compliance program. We're trying to get as much of it done as we can under the PBRs, not doing separate efforts, again, because we get economies of scale and we get benefits, because if you go into a landfill and you discover some sort of munitions piece there, if you've already got that work elsewhere on the contract, then you can rapidly respond without having to do a lengthy contract mod or stoppage. So we're trying to handle those in our PBRs.
Okay, I got a few more questions. Are small businesses required to be a GSA 899 schedule holder in order to participate on a BPA team for defense?
Only through GSA type BPAs do they have to have an 899 schedule. If it's a BPA that's awarded either through a 772nd or the Corps of Engineers that's not going through a GSA schedule, they do not have to be a GSA a 899 schedule contractor. But right now, the only acquisition vehicles that we have out there are the GSA, and the second one will be through the GSA, executed by the 772nd. You will have to be on that particular schedule. You have to have an 899-1. Otherwise, you will not be able to compete.
Okay. Next question. Is AFCEC going to publish a phone listening so a contractor can contact POC? This has been a recurring question from contractors. So, Tammy, that might be a question for you.
Yes, I have the same question, and I wondered about that as well, because my office gets a lot of those requests as well, from contractors wanting a phone listing. The issue with us publishing that is to list the name and phone number is considered PII, okay? And we just cannot post that out on the website. However, if you come see me or email me, I'll see what I can do for you, okay? As far as getting it. The issue is just with publishing it. So right now, I have contacted PA and our security folks to see whether we can publish it at least by office symbol, okay, in my office, because it'll at least get you there a little bit easier, maybe without the names, all right?
Okay, 2 more questions. This one is probably for Richard. Could you please go back to slide 8 and repeat the expected timing for releasing the pending participants opportunities in phase 1?
Would you like back on camera?
So can you go back to slide 8? So I imagine that's the first chart where you show the, go 9, pardon me, 9.
It's actually slide 10.
10. That's it. So the question is, and repeat the expected timing for releasing the pending
Right, okay, so-
opportunities in phase 1.
All right, so for Joint Base Langley Eustis, the expected RFP release is going to be March 5th. Joint Base Charleston Shaw will be February 14th. Seymour Johnson Moody, February 14th. Nellis Creech and Nellis Range, that was, RFP was out on the 6th of February. Cannon Holloman, the 6th of February. Little Rock and Altus, 11 February. I don't have anything yet on Effie Warren, and I don't have anything yet on Mountstrom and Mountain Home. But those were supposed to go out this week, and they haven't, so they're probably delayed anywhere from 1 week to 2 weeks.
Thank you, Richard. We have one more question. When you publish the clearinghouse projects list in a particular month, what award timeline are you referring to? Within the next month, quarter, or what? So it's basically, they see them, so they're kind of trying to anticipate when the requirement is.
Yeah, and it does depend. We don't always know because they're actually being juggled along with the other requirements that's within each one of the different contracting branches. So that information is not always known as far as when the RFP is going to be released for each one of those.
Okay, no other questions at this time.
Number 12, as more contracts are set aside for small business, are there opportunities for large business to assist AFCEC in performing their environmental mission for the Air Force? As we do new acquisitions, we conduct market research, which tells us whether or not small business is a viable candidate or if we have to go with large business. There's nothing precluding large businesses from partnering with small business on AFCEC contracts. But basically we do market research, and then in accordance with government policy, we figure out whether it's going small business, 8A set aside, any of the other categories, or if we go out full and open. Slide, please. Timing on the, I won't ask what they are. Tammy, I think those are yours.
Yes, those are the new A&E acquisitions that are out. You can see the timeline there. Full and open competitions are expected to be awarded in the March time frame, and small business competitions will follow along accordingly. So it'll be staggered awards.
Okay, we have a question for small business. What are the AFCEC small business goals?
Grace, would you want to move up to the table?
We still don't, those still have not officially been published. They're supposed to be published by Secretary of the Air Force Small Business, and they officially have not been given to us at this time, so we don't have them yet.
I guess I'm going to ask a question because I'm anticipating it. I would, based on what it was last year, could we assume it's going to be similar to what was last year?
The mathematical approach that they took this year was different, and it's going to be based on the actuals that were done, not actually on the goals that there were there. So on the actuals that that were met, there's going to be added to that a slight improvement. is what we have been told.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
No other questions at this time?
Project list for AE13ES. That's on the clearinghouse reports that are posted monthly.
That's correct. There's, the link is there, and also the 14, FY14 execution program and all the projects are listed out there under the other link as well.
Okay. 4PAE08 will be extended through May in response to question 15 with the capability of 3-month extensions if required. So in chunks of 3 months, right now it's going to go through May, and then could go out another 3 months, depending on how long it takes to award the follow-ons. Slide, please.
I think that's the last one.
This is the disclaimer.
Disclaimer, legal disclaimer.
Anything I say can and will not be held against me in a court of law.
So,
Slide, please. Nope, that's
this
it.
time, if there's any other questions, either on the chat line or over the phone line, we can stay on for a few minutes to answer those. Closing remarks by
I just wanted to thank Mr. Trevino and Mr. Smith for getting the information together. Our goal within enterprise procurement, again, was to provide an outreach to you guys, our industry partners, those of you who are on our existing contracts, to discuss some of the upcoming requirements and discuss the plan, execution plan that we have for this year. We are, excited that you guys, met with us today and that you took the time out to do that. And we solicit any of your comments and feedback with regard to the DCO session. Was this the right way to do it? Is it going to be better just to do a conference call? Anything to improve on in the future, and whether or not you felt that this was a beneficial forum with regard to information. We don't want to punish you guys to make you come if you don't think that it is valuable to you, or to get our folks to get all the information together. So, Vince, you have a
Yeah, I was
question?
going to say, I've been writing down, well, actually copying and pasting all the questions.
Yes.
So we'll go through those. Some of them were questions.
Right.
So I captured everything. And in one of the responses, I said that we would answer all the questions asked and make those available to everyone.
That's right.
So
Okay.
we'll do that. We'll let you guys QA/QC it, make sure you're okay with our answers. And we have one of our guests that says, "Ian, you look great on TV. You need to go into show business."
Hey, that's great. That's great.
Hey, Tammy, if I could.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to piggyback on something that's being said there, and I believe Richard's got the same point. We really find this dialogue very useful. Our program will not get better if we don't get the feedback. If we're doing something stupid, we need y'all to tell us that there's a better way. We don't have the answer to everything. In fact, that's why we rely on contractors so much. So I would hope that in some way, shape, or form we continue the dialogues. Appreciate the questions, appreciate the feedback, and we'll try to get answers out to you as we continue dialoguing.
Right. Any additional questions or requests for information, if you could just send it into the CPE, AFCEC CPE mailbox that you used to send in your registration for this DCO, and we'll be monitoring that and answering the questions and post those out for everyone.
Okay, one more question. How do we plan to distribute the answers to these questions? What is a question?
We will either provide it via email to all of the attendees who signed up for the DCO and for the telecon, or we will provide a link to that information out onto our website.
Okay, no one's typing, so I guess we're done.
All right, well, this concludes. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay, one more. It's CEP. Mr. Williams, we said AFCEC CEP for feedback.
Yes,
So basically,
CEP.
yes,
Right.
CEP. So,
CEP.
I'm sorry, CPE. Gosh,
Charlie Papa Echo.
You're throwing me off with all the acronyms. CPE.
So the same email, that you
Right,
received the
we
invite
registered.
to, if you'll just send it back
Right.
to us.
Right. We'll send out that email again to everyone so you have that box.